Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Now, is Kenya's human rights trajectory deteriorating? Have authorities investigated or prosecuted law enforcement officers implicated in human rights abuses? Well, the Human Rights Watch today released a report that contains valuable insights on the human rights situation for various countries, including Kenya. Now in studio, I'm joined by Mausi Segun. She's the Human Rights Watch Africa Director, and we're set to have a conversation touching on the just released report, which was released in Nairobi today, but touching on a number of countries, including Kenya. Thanks for your time and welcome to the studios.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's begin with matters closer home, touching on Kenya, where 2024 was a busy year, marked with finance bill protests and consequently the heavy-handed crackdown against nationwide protests by security agencies, where rights groups are actually reporting up to 26 people missing to date. What's the state of human rights in Kenya, according to the report that's just been released?
According to our report, the state of human rights in Kenya is bad. That's just to put it simply. It's a complex question, and of course the response has to be complex as well, because there are some bright lights, I have to say, but I would say that the negatives have become really disturbing. Now, the bright light for me, I would say, would be, and this is reflected in our report, the fact that people feel boldened to go on the streets to express their concerns, their views on government decisions and policies, and largely young people. That is impressive. It's not everywhere that people have the freedom to do that. Now, that is just one step of it. The other side of it is the response from the authorities, right? Yeah. And it was unfortunate that the response from the authorities to these young people, I mean, I'm aware that some of it got violent after some time, including the attempt to overrun the parliament on June 25th. But then the response of the authorities went over and beyond. There is a response that is legal, that it has to be proportional, it has to be necessary to use force. The use of force has to be controlled. Because these people, even if you think they're armed, their arms cannot be more than stones and sticks. In comparison to government security agents who would have arms and ammunition that are lethal, including tear gas. Tear gas have been known to kill people, especially children, people who are in enclosed spaces. And when you throw the tear gas canister, it hits someone, it kills. And so the use of that force obviously caused a deterioration in that situation. Now, the protest itself is one thing. I think part of the success that they achieved was to get the president to accede to their demand to put down that bill. He sent it back to Parliament. Parliament agreed with him and withdrew the bill. So that is success. That is success of some level of advocacy from the public. But then the aftermath of the protests, our research shows that individuals identified of members of Kenyan security agencies have gone after the people that they believe led this protest. One by one, they have been picked up. Many have completely disappeared since their abduction. That's what we're calling it. Because if you want to arrest, you identify yourself as an arresting officer, an agent of the state, and you let the individual you are arresting know the reason why they are being arrested. Sure. Those are called fair trial and due process rights. So these rights were not accorded to these individuals. Those who came and took them away with violence, took them away, held them incommunicado. Some for a few hours, the fortunate ones were held for a few hours where they received beatings or forms of torture. Sometimes on official detention facilities, or even nondescript locations, some people in forests, some people in uncompleted buildings, and a few ultimately made it to a police station. And the manner of the interrogation revealed the identity of those who carried out the abductions. They had information, they had data, they had information about where the people had been meeting, where they'd been going. They demanded for their phones. They were using codes that only security agents would use. And so it was easy to extrapolate for these victims who these individuals were. Those who are not so lucky have not been found. You mentioned 26. 26 is the number that is still, those are the ones that have not been returned.
Okay.
So more than 80 have been involved. We, on our part, all the way from 2023 into the 2023 protests around election disputes, flowing into the one in 2024, we have documented more than 60 people killed. Bodies have showed up, either in the quarry that you know of, on the streets, in the forest, people just by the roadside, and in the morgues. Others till date, their family members have no information about where they are. That in law we call enforced disappearances.
Okay. And it's quite unfortunate because Kenyans find themselves in a scenario where the perpetrators of the extrajudicial abductions and killings happen to be the very same security agencies meant to protect life and property. So who do you go to? That's a big question. But in a democracy like Kenya, to whom much is given, much is tested and expected. So when authorities threaten to shut down civil society and donor organizations for allegedly supporting the protests, how much of this is an affront to human rights in the country?
It's absolutely, it's unfortunate, honestly, because I think the government is looking for a scapegoat. And they have decided to scapegoat the human rights and civil society community. It is far from it. Any group of non-government, non-military gathering is civil, and that is civil society, whether they are formally registered or unregistered. So a group of protesters, that is civil society. And so when you accuse civil society organizations or donor communities of funding this protest, it's an insult to the intelligence of these people who are protesting. These are Kenyans. These are people who have a stake in what happens in this country. When taxes are raised, they are the ones who suffer. They are the ones whose pockets can no longer, meet the needs of themselves and their family members. And so their concerns and the expression of that concern is a legitimate one. They do not need anyone from elsewhere dictating to them, giving them money. Honestly, to get on the street, to protest, how much money does that cost you? To organize over social media, how much money does that cost you? It's not about money. The government is missing the point, and I think it is deliberate. It's to take away the power of the ordinary people on the street to decide for themselves, to move of their own volition and accord, to say, no, we don't agree with you. And the government must respect that. The governance is a position of trust. When politicians come to the public to ask for votes, they're asking them to trust them with their power, to trust them with the knowledge to manage the economy, the political space, the social space. And so that trust is a social contract. And where the government is breaching that contract, the citizenry have a right to demand explanations, and where they know their voices cannot be heard individually, to come together. And that's why the right to assembly, the right to association, freedom of association, and to freedom of expression are pivotal in any democracy. And now there are institutions that the government itself set up to ensure that there is oversight over its own activities. For example, the Independent Police Oversight Authority. The authority, they are working under very difficult circumstances. And the fact that they've not done as much as they could is not because of a lack of will. But from what we have heard from them directly, they have received threats themselves to stop doing their legal mandated work. You have the Kenya Commission on Human Rights, which at the beginning of these abductions began to document because the reports was getting to them. Their job is to bridge that gap between the public and the government. They were doing their work, they received threats as well, and they had to stop. So the government needs to sit back and ask itself a question: who is it working for? Is it still working for Kenyans?
Should be a listening government. Interesting. We need to take a short break because the bills must be paid. But as we come back, we'll be focusing on the report, taking a look at yet another issue that has been highlighted.